So, look, why don't we kick off? We've got a few of us in here now. Thank you for coming along. This is session number 6 of AWISE 2020. What was a one-day summit and expo is a series of online webinars. Really excited about today's topic, which is robots in the workplace, and very pleased to have Nicci Rossouw back with us. Nicci last year was presenting her telepresence robots at the expo. We've also got another special guest here today. I'd like to say welcome to Cutie. Cutie, how are you today?
Hi everyone. I am Cutie and welcome to this exciting day. I know I am so cute now, so I can talk all day, but today Nicci will do the talking. Hey Nicci, you're you now. Let's hear about how robots are being used.
That's cute.
That certainly is cute. And as I said, so today we're here to talk about robots in the workplace, or hear about it. Before we do, I would like to throw over to Victor from the Centre for Optimism. He's my co-host here, and he's going to talk to us about optimism and innovation. Welcome, Victor.
Well, it's great to join you again, Guy. And Nicci, you know, I met Nicci last year in the expo, and you can't come away from meeting Nicci without being filled full of energy and joy. And you and Craig, always fantastic on these events. And I see our friend, Professor Soldani, is back, you know, with his optimism for artificial intelligence, and Angela sharing the optimism now of Albury as the borders have opened. So it's a spectacular day for us today. And so the question of innovation and optimism, the science says you can't be an innovator unless you are optimistic. The pessimist is ground down with failure. You know, whose fault was it? Why did it go wrong? And, you know, the greatest example of instant success in innovation is, of course, Dyson and his vacuum cleaner, where it took 5,000 models of attempt and failure before he got that vacuum cleaner that became a worldwide success. So, you know, this entire summit, AWISE, is all about the innovators. It's all about the people prepared to have a go. It's all about the people prepared to have an experiment. And Nicci exemplifies that to me. And as we always do in these events, Nicci, may I ask you, what makes you optimistic?
Hi, Victor. Hi, Guy, and everyone else. Many of you I know here, so thank you for the opportunity to speak and the lovely welcome. You know, optimism to me is a little bit tied to hope. And if you've got hope and you've got something to look forward to, I see those two closely related. And you know, personally, what makes me optimistic and hopeful is I think there's such good people in the world doing such amazing things, and more related to robotics in the industry that I work in. The stuff that's going on in this field is just absolutely mind-blowing. And I'll tell you a little bit about it today, that I go, you know, if we use this technology for the good, we've got such an amazing world that we can create, that we live in.
It's wonderful. And leading up to this in the summit, you know, we had that magnificent session on the Internet of Things, you know, understanding the possibilities there. And then last week with David Soldani, you know, we had this enchanting description of what 5G and 6G will mean for us. And, you know, he broached the topic of robots in the workplace and robots in manufacturing. But Nicci, you exemplify it. These are the devices that are bringing a better life to people with COVID, to children with leukemia, to farmers, to all sorts of people. So I think you've got a little presentation to show us, to enchant us with some of those stories of optimism and hope and social robots.
I have. Thank you, Victor. I'm not going to bore you to death with a PowerPoint presentation too long, but I will give you a little bit of a rundown of what I've been doing in this field. And if I can just find my own presentation here, I'm able to share it. So let me go into presenter view. There we are. So obviously the Albury Wodonga Innovation Summit. So a wonderful festival you've put up together, you and Guy. So congratulations to you. The future of robotics in the workplace. This is really a space that I've inhabited for the last 6 years. A bit about my journey, because I always get asked this question, how did I end up in robotics? My husband and I were the co-founders of an agile consultancy business called Tabar, and part of the work there was workplace happiness conferences, and we trialed one of the telepresence robots, the Double, and it was such a huge success that we decided to buy some more. And I've got a sales background, which I promptly, sold all these robots. And my husband announced to me one day in February 2015, he's registered Exaptec, Exaptec being an acronym for Extreme Application Technology, and here is my company. So, I do think of that day. I was absolutely petrified because I really didn't know too much about this technology. But, the wonderful thing, and this makes me optimistic, is the internet, and you can just learn so much stuff. So that's basically the journey. We do focus in personal robots. Robotics, as everyone would be aware of, if this is news, they do fall into distinct categories. You can have industrial, manufacturing, medical devices, but we fall under the personal, which is social robots, telepresence, and the educational robots. Part of my work that I do has been largely educational, telling people where we use this. When I started off, and I would tell people what is a telepresence robot, and actually I met someone yesterday that I said, this is the work that I do. Do you know what it is? And she said, no, she didn't have any idea. And in my early days, I used to be very, I'd say it's like an iPad on a stick. I go, that's such a basic description of these phenomenal technology devices. It's a tablet that moves around on a movable platform that represents you when you can't be in a certain place. And as you've mentioned, Victor, the case studies, I've sold over 300 of these robots in my time doing this. Just amazing case studies of how people are using the technology. And as Mahatma Gandhi says, that the future depends on what we do in the present. And I refer back to my opening statement of, how do we use these devices? It's up to us. Technology it's up to the user, what things you put in place, and the use cases that you use it for. So where are we using robots today? I thought I'd take you through a quick, just a very brief demo of what I'm doing in my space, and then we'll go more holistically to some of the other robots that we'll talk about. This is a beam telepresence. So if you can see, it's got a screen, it's on a movable device, and it's got wheels, as you can see, and the lifeblood of all of these telepresence robots is the internet. Obviously that's what you need a good internet connection. And as David was talking last week, 5G, this is just beautiful news to my ears. Case studies of this robot, I can tell you a couple of stories, but the one that particularly stands out, there's an organization in Perth that deals with people with disabilities, and they actually enable them to do things. So they buy these robots as part of technology that could be utilized, and they let a lady that was disabled, that rarely leaves her home, if ever, attend a conference. And, she actually took time to email me to tell me about her experience. And she said to me, this was so liberating. It's not someone walking around with a computer showing her what they think she would be interested in. She actually had complete control of the robot. She was driving it around. When she got tired, she could take it back to the base. It could dock, and it could, it could recharge its batteries. People were very mindful of her, and she just had, she really had a life-changing experience. This little padbot, again, one of my clients was, the gentleman who had a car accident and actually ended up being a paraplegic. And part of the insurance settlement, the claim was that he was able to get one of these little telepresence robots. Now, he had actually had his own business all most of his life. And this little robot actually enabled him to have a rehabilitation period at home while he was adjusting to his new life and, you know, the challenges that he was facing, while he had this little robot at work, being able to drive around, talk to everyone working there, seeing what was being done. So the connection and being able to carry on with his work as per usual in a way. Again, phenomenal use of technology, and he wouldn't have been able to do it without this little telepresence robot. Now, I actually have a bit of a robot video here, it's slightly tongue-in-cheek, but look, I think this is actually going to be more prevalent now, and I can tell you some more case studies about this, but let's play and hear it. Is it working? There we go.
It's weird to be a robot in an office, but it's just as weird to have to interact with one. You can't shake their hand, you can't grab a cup of coffee. They might fall over on you or freeze up while you're talking to them. But robot coworkers are going to become more and more common in the near future, so we all need to learn how to get along. After living as a robot employee for a few months, here's some etiquette tips I've learned.
There you go. You just had something on your nose.
That'll be in the video, so thanks, Marcus.
My pleasure.
First, rules for humans with robot coworkers. This machine is a physical extension of your real coworker, so don't do anything to it that you wouldn't do to that person in real life. Don't inappropriately touch a robot. Would you pick up your coworker without asking them? No. So don't do that to their robot either. Also a no-no, shaking it, pushing it, or generally touching it at all without asking. Don't sneak up on a robot.
Family. So I'm thinking about that story.
Your coworker doesn't have eyes in the back of her robot head, and she barely has peripheral vision. So don't approach her from behind and start talking. Where are you? Wait, who is this?
I'm over here.
Move to the front where she can see you.
Oh, there you are. Hey.
Okay, cool. Hold on, let me get. And before you launch into a face-to-face meeting, let your coworker grow a little taller so they're looking at your eyes and not at your belt.
Oh, hey. Hey.
Hey. Sorry.
Now we're on the same level.
Rules for robots. Ask for help when you need it, but don't be a burden. Your robot may get stuck in a Wi-Fi dead zone. Its microphone may go dead. You may get lost or fall over. In these moments, there's no such thing as pride. Ask for help, but don't force your coworkers to become constant robot babysitters. Thank you. Don't interrupt. Your remote robot may have a slight lag, causing you to interrupt everyone in meetings. Calibrate so that you don't alienate your humans.
Crit for you.
Yes, she is. Hey, delete.
Oh my god.
Oh, sorry. Don't sneak up on humans. Just as it's rude for a human being to stand silently behind somebody's desk, watching what they type and listening to their phone calls, robots too should refrain from this kind of creepiness. Since your robot doesn't make much noise as you roll by, make a habit of saying hello to your coworkers so they hear you approach.
Whoa.
You're not supposed to sneak up on a robot.
You snuck up on me.
I mean, I always speak up. I always think it's louder than it is.
Hey, follow the coffee. Want some coffee?
Oh, God, yes.
Nice coffee.
So I actually work with an organisation in New South Wales that specialises with people with disabilities and reintroducing them to the workplace. And they're using Padbots and the Double, and they've actually put a flag on the robots because not all the telepresence come in the same, the hardware differs. Some are sort of my height where I'm sitting, and some are like my shoulder height, about 5'2". So they all vary in their height capabilities. And this particular group of people actually put a flag on to let people know that it's coming. And they actually also put little bells on because, as you could see, you can actually sneak up to people and give them a fright. And when we were experimenting with this robot, we snuck up on my son that at that time was doing his VCE, and I think I nearly gave him a heart attack because he didn't hear us coming. So more about robots in the workplace and where are robots being utilized today. So I'm sure you all know Boston Dynamics Spot the Robot. Now, Spot was used in, particularly, I'm going to focus a little bit on the COVID situation here. It was used in Singapore to warn people about keeping their distances, wear their masks. And if you think about the sort of repetitive work that, would you want a person walking around saying this to people? I don't think so. And also, you know, we lived in, it was quite a stressful time, and people, you know, people reacted differently to the COVID situation, depending on their personal circumstances and things. And I think, you know, you're putting someone actually sometimes at risk, telling them what to do. And I mean, I live in Melbourne, and certainly I saw some extraordinary things of people's behavior, but, you know, I related to it, stress. You know, this is a new situation and people don't know what to do. And you know, you have to be careful how you view people and what their personal circumstances are. So I really see these robots being in a unique position here that, you know, they can give information safely. There's no human being going to be in danger here. And it utilized very effectively in Singapore. Now the sterilizations robot, which is actually quite an interesting specialization, and coincidentally it's sort of just hit the market now about a year ago. I've actually just done an interview with Professor Wendy Moyle about this little paraseal, so I'll talk about it a little bit later in my presentation. But like, this is just some of the areas where robots are being used today in Australia and across the globe. By the way, that's Boston Dynamics robot. I actually saw it is also doing site inspections on building inspections now. So it's part of the project management team, if you like, and it actually goes around looking at what people are doing on high-rise buildings. Now, the Da Vinci surgical robot, this is actually in use in Australia today. There are about 83 of them out of 5,500 worldwide. There are 83 in Australia. And the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney is the largest of its type in the Southern Hemisphere. And this is actually an accredited Da Vinci robot where they do actual training on it. Now, the Wesley Hospital in Brisbane also does a lot of work up there. They've got a lot of surgical surgeons working on robotics, but the Royal Prince Alfred in Sydney, actually, they've done an enormous amount of robotic surgeries. They've got a huge team there, about 15 people there. They've got the biggest, I'd say, like, conglomeration of surgical robots there. And I think all up, you could say probably more than 25,000 of these surgeries, robotic surgeries, have been done. So this is real time. This is actually happening now in Australia. What's also very interesting, last year I listened to a program on my local radio station in Melbourne, and they were talking about a robotic surgery that was done on a kid at the back of his throat, and they couldn't actually do the surgery any other way. If it wasn't for the robot, they wouldn't have been able to do it. So if you can think of that sort of surgery that you're doing, that you don't actually have to break someone's jaw to do it now, because you've got these instruments that can go in. It's not this huge hand that you're shoving down someone's throat. So the use of this is just absolutely phenomenal. You know, going forward, and I don't really know what the case is, whether it's, you know, Medibank covers these things. That's a completely different conversation. But, you know, probably I think as the adoption rate of the surgical robots increases, then this is going to become more of our medical system, as with COVID and the telehealth, that's now just acceptable way of doing things. I think as it becomes more common, it's going to become more affordable. Now, the NISCO robotic story is actually a great one. This is actually based in Melbourne as well, at Federation Square. I haven't actually been there, but I've met the lady who runs the company. And they've got Pepper the robot. I don't know if you can see Pepper there. I don't know if my finger can point, but she's standing there taking orders, and it's completely automated. So the only thing that's not automated is the human being stocking the ice cream. So this is apparently been a huge success. And in Sydney, I believe there's a shop that's just open, and this is the brainchild of some Harvard kids that came, I think it's Harvard kids that came up with this concept of doing food, it's stir fried, All the ingredients are put into a pot, it's swirled around, and the only actual human contact or intervention or use is going to be when they put the toppings on it and they actually hand it to the person. So when you arrive there, you've got this menu and you choose what you want in your food, and all the ingredients get automatically put in. These pots rotate like this, and voila, you're eating this huge plate of food. I think it was $8 in the United States, so I'm hoping it's going to be the same price point here. Wonderful use of it, and you go, this is so super cool. Timmy the Robot. Okay, this is one of my little superstar, and as you can see at the back here, she's also featured here. This little robot is actually now in hospitals in Australia, up in Queensland in Adelaide, and used as a telemedicine. So that's actually Dr. Mark Boyd and Baldwin there. There was a video about him talking to his patients. So the real good use here of these things is that, you know, you don't have to put personal protective clothing on. You haven't got all these layers of muffledness that once you're approaching your patient. And, you know, I was sort of lying there thinking to myself, if I was sick and this doctor or nurse came up to me with all this clothing, I can barely hear them talk. How would I react to this little robot that comes up to me and this doctor saying to me, how are you going? You know, how are you feeling? Talk to me. There's no physical contact. He's not going to get any virus from me. Everyone's relaxed and you can actually share information. So worldwide, Timmy has been, there's been a really good uptake. It's available nearly in every country worldwide. And as you can see on the other slide there, you can do temperature measurements. It's actually got a little sterilization accessory that you can put on it as well. You can, look, suffice to say, a market is now opened up for accessories with Timmy and the Timmy robot. So I would say this is one of the smartest, most intuitive little robots available on the market at the moment. And that's not just because I'm the distributor in Australia and New Zealand. It's a very smart little robot. It's got a little tray that can take a 3-kilogram payload. So you can see the ergonomics of it is the balancing of these robots is actually quite important as well. Okay, drones. This is I was talking to someone yesterday and I said, look, if I didn't have this business, I'd start a drone business because it's a phenomenal market space, this. And I believe there are over 2,000 drone companies in Australia. So that's just how big this market is. Swoop Aero, Eric Peck, one of my favorite stories is he's got a drone company in Port of Melbourne where they 3D print these medical drones that are deployed all over the world, places like Vanuatu, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mozambique, Indonesia. And these drones are used for the delivery of medical supplies, emergency medical supplies. You know, it's just fabulous. I was reading of one of his stories in Africa. I can't remember whether it was Kenya or wherever it was, but the guy was saying, you know, what would normally take them like literally 2 months because clinics there are staffed by nurses or just by volunteers, by people trying to help the community. It's completely different to what we know here. And he was telling the story that, you know, if you take someone's blood, by the time you actually get it there, if something hasn't happened to it in the meantime, like you're dropping the blood vial or, you know, like it's just a moot point then because you have to come back and get some more. With these drones, like the percentages, like it's incredible what it's done, the turnaround to their medical system there. Eric has actually been a guest here at my office, and I laugh and I say I'm just watching him and waiting for him to list his company because I'm going to be buying shares. So most of you would know, if you don't, that drones are being utilized in fire inspections today. This is happening in Australia, that they can actually hover over fires and see what type of fires there are there other accelerants, what sort of fire prevention, you know, would you need foam or water, what type of fire it is the structure safe, are there people there, what do you need to do? So like again, phenomenal. And just other drone stories that I've been reading about and experiments that I've been doing across the world. Inspection of habitat, where drones actually shoot in arrows into trees to monitor like the trees, how much moisture is in the tree, the habitat around them. Counting sea turtles is actually a case that's been done in Australia. They came up to like 68,000, an amazing amount, because how they did it is they stitched all these images together of the photos that were taken with the drone, and the window that they had wasn't really big, so they had to have these drones out there taking like in quadrants of the photos. They would put them together, and they earmarked like how many turtles there were, so they were blown away by actually how many sea turtles they had. The drone conference, the World of Drones and Robotics Congress, was just held in Brisbane the week before last or last week, and again, just the amazing stories of people doing. And one of the guys there that I was listening to his talk, he's actually developed software in a drone that can fly around and can detect IEDs, you know, these bombs that they have lying. And when it rains and the soil moves, you don't know where the bombs are. So he's actually designed this drone that can fly around and can identify the bomb, and it can see how far it is. And normally if there's one, there are more. So absolutely fascinating use of drones. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's been done in this space now. Asset management, looking at you know, your electricity lines, whether it's going into sewer pipes where you go and inspect there. I was reading that this is in India particularly, sewer inspection, like on average 1 person a week dies going into these sewers doing inspection, and if you've got drones going in there, like an absolutely fabulous use of it. So look, these are just a little bit of the I thought that I'd just share in terms of you know, what are we doing in this space? Like there are many more other, you know, medical applications, little robots that you can actually, little devices that you can swallow that can map the inside of you, snake-like little creatures that can, you know, that can sort of go into difficult places. I think the market is just absolutely expanding with the fantastic work that's being done. Now, of course, ethical implications, like this is always a question of, you know, unmanned armed drones. That's a favorite. Like, you know, do we really want these sort of drones flying around and, you know, unmanned, and that they can basically just shoot whatever they decide to shoot? Professor Toby Walsh is actually, I've spoken to him about this on my podcast, very interesting discussion we had there. He's actually got an open letter to the United Nations banning these devices. If anyone is interested in this, you know, the link is actually available on the internet that you can Google it. He was involved in the writing up of the ethical like framework for robotics in Australia last year. I've also got that available. IBM has also just released their 2020 ethical framework of, you know, how do we use these robots, what guidelines, artificial intelligence, you know, do you do it just because you can? It doesn't mean because you can do it, you should do it, you know, all sorts of these interesting questions around it. This always comes up, robots and job creation. You know, like I look at the Vinci robotics as an example, that this whole training center was created for these robots. I mean, it is a very specialized area, but there is job creation. No doubt automation, we are going to see job loss, but my personal view is it's not going to be overnight. You know, I think there is enough of a lag time for people to see, look, if I'm in certain industries, maybe I need to upskill or do other work or other stuff. But my view again, and I'm not in the big players, but I sort of look at it and I go, if you're in this space and you're actually taking jobs away from people, then in my opinion, you have a moral obligation to actually further educate them and send them into a different career path. Like, that's just me, because that's just the way I view the world. And, you know, again, we get to the question of what about a basic income for everyone? I think it's Elon Musk and Bill Gates are huge supporters of that. And in a way, if you look at COVID, what has actually happened in Australia is we've all had a basic income because, you know, we've been hit by this pandemic. So I think there's room for discussion in how we create the future that we're going to be living in. Just some things I just want to talk to you about. I host the Melbourne Robotics Meetup group. Tonight, actually, as it turns out, we're having a talk by Professor Rob Sparrow, and he talks about ethics and robotics. This is his speciality. He's a professor at Monash University. That's Exaptec hosts that group. I'm co-host of Women in Robotics, the Melbourne chapter, because it's a global initiative. And our first meeting is on January the 28th. And we've got a very interesting lady coming to talk to us about her work in drones and the sound that, you know, noise, control of it. So for any of ladies and men, you're more than welcome to join the Women in Robotics group. It's aimed to foster and mentor women, particularly in robotics, but you know, we're open to everyone. Let's Talk Robotics is a podcast that I host. I started this in COVID because I've been thinking about it for quite some time, and I've just next Wednesday I'm releasing my talk with Professor Wendy Moyle on Para the seal and the amazing work that she's done there. She specializes in dementia, depression, and something else, but fascinating work that she's done in this area. My robotics podcast is actually, there's a FeedBuzz website, feedbuzz.com, that's actually, they monitor websites, and they let me know that of 25 global podcasts in robotics, mine is actually at number 9. So I'm going, oh, that's not too bad. I immediately emailed back and said, what do I do to get into the top 5? So not competitive at all. If you're interested in robotics, Inside Robotics, a bi-monthly e-magazine that's actually released by Tim Michael, an Australian in Sydney. He's also on my podcast. That was the discussion last week. Do register. He's got fascinating stories, and he's across the world on what's going on in robotics, but particularly in Australia, obviously. And if you want to tell him a story, or you know of someone that you think should be featured there, he's a very, very nice guy. Contact him. You can chat to him. The other thing of note that I think you really should know about is the Robotics Roadmap for Australia 2018. That's available on the internet, but we've just busy with the 2020 version now, and it's coming out in January, and I was involved in a couple of the work groups there. So very interesting work on what's being done. If you want to know about robotics in Australia, this is the document to certainly have. And then this is just me. This is where you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, so please do connect with me. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well. That's my email, nikki@exaptec.com. And if you're interested in tonight's discussion, please do email me, and I'll send you the Zoom link, because I don't just put it. It's not available on the internet just as it is there. So I think that's basically me in a nutshell.
Well, thank you very much, Nicci. That was a very good cross-section of what's happening with robots in the workplace and some of the things we can expect. I think what you shared with us shows that if we think of robots, I think we often think of droids like a 3CPO, you know, something that is human-like, but there's such a spectrum to what robotics covers, from, as you said, the industrial arm that might be in a workplace doing welding or dangerous works with hot metals in a smelter, for example, through to precision activities like surgery. And I think that was an amazing looking spider-like robot. And none of us really want to have surgery, but it's certainly like a higher probability of success. And when you can use precision instruments, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, the accuracy of these, like for instance, the Da Vinci, you know, if I had an option of a dangerous operation and the precision, I would go with an automated one. And they're very experienced, these surgeons. They've actually, the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, they've actually just been involved in a 4-day virtual robotics symposium. And the Australian team was invited into it. So really interesting work being done in that space. You know, I think for me, and I'm sure for everyone, the question is, you know, how much does this stuff cost? Because, you know, my mind's just going, it's going to be far more expensive. I actually had my roof renovated, and one of the people coming for the quote sent up a drone to have a look at it. I thought this was just the coolest way to inspect my roof. I wasn't actually there for the day, which was a real pity, but I looked at it. Now, the snag was his quote was $1,000 more expensive. Had it not been that one, I would have gone, great, I'll just go with this guy. So, you know, like there's a bit of a trade-off, but I think as these devices become, this technology is just used more often, you know, the big thing about robotics now is the price of sensors. That's why they've hit the market the way they have, because the actual pricing of sensors has come down. So this makes it affordable to make it en masse. Now, whether Australia, you know, adoption rate in a study now in 38 countries, we're 35th. So our adoption rate isn't great. And, you know, when people say to me, oh, should I be worried about robots taking my job? I go, well, not at the moment in Australia, because our adoption rate is so low. But this is a real negative. You know, we're losing out in places such as manufacturing, where we can really make a difference in terms of our capabilities worldwide, and we're not stepping into the space.
Yeah. And I'm seeing there, Helen Peters was in our audience, was talking about regulation. And just prior to the session, I was reading up on some standards that are being brought out in Europe around cobots, and the fact that, you know, now people can be near robots in a safe way. What are your thoughts about that coexistence? The video you had showed a bit of a, you know, like you said, a bit of a fun or a pun on the way, you know, they're being used, but how's that shaping up, the use of cobots?
Oh, cobots is a huge industry as well. There's a company up in Brisbane, Harrington Dynamics, that have just started that. Look, I think it's incredible what they can do. If you look at my son's an organic chemist. He's doing his PhD at Melbourne Uni next year. I'll just throw that in there because it's a mum. They get their brains from the mom. So for all the moms out there, go girls. And I was talking to him about these, you know, the experiments they do and the speed that they can do it with. So if you've got all these test tubes and you've got this thing going like at the speed of knots, like why wouldn't you use a cobot to do it? Like the assistive technology there is fantastic. You're not taking humans can't do it that fast. You get tired, you'll mess things up. So in that instance, I go, this is a brilliant use of technology. When it comes to actually analyzing it and doing all of that, well, then you get your humans in again. I see robotics, we coexist with each other. This is ideally how I want people to look at the technology. I mean, we coexist with our phones, so-called, we don't. Phones have completely taken over our lives. So I sort of look at when people go, oh, these robots are going to take over, I go, you know, have you looked at your phone use? Have you actually looked at how many hours you've actually sat on your phone today, which is, after all, just another piece of technology.
So that's an amazing point. You know, where you know, got a pandemic around obesity and weight. What are the concerns where we become lazy and we're getting the robots to do everything? That's one of the potential issues.
Look, I'm relatively, you know, I know that people far more experienced in this field, but I just don't see it because I work with these robots every day. You know, certainly my field of robots, I just don't see them taking over someone's job. The Timmy here, this little superstar that's got your logo on and everything, I've actually got clients that have programmed her to be a virtual receptionist when their in-person receptionist goes on lunch. So I think that's a brilliant use. I've got another client that has got a warehouse that's actually locked up and people go and look at he's a furniture salesman. He's got these huge pieces of furniture so no one can carry them off. And you go in there, he gives you a code and the Timmy meets you and he from his home drives around talking to the people. Now he wasn't going to be there anyway because he was just going to, you know, give the people a code and then he'd phone them and talk to them. But he uses the Timmy robot now because it's a telepresence. It can map. So he's pre-mapped it to go and he just says to the people, follow the Timmy, and the Timmy goes to the pieces of furniture that he wants to discuss. So again, it's a use of technology where he can't be and he wasn't going to be there anyway.
Yeah. So Victor, I mean, as you say, Nicci's infectiously optimistic and sitting in amongst all this, she sees the positivity here for the robots. I myself could see hundreds of possible uses, but what are your thoughts, Victor?
I still remember the original series of Lost in Space. I'm old enough to remember the robot with Dr. Smith going, warning, warning, warning. So in fact, Nicci, I think you should shut up because there's a little person behind you who's been blinking away wanting to say something. So can I ask QT a question? QT, what makes you optimistic?
Victor, that's a great question. I believe that in the coming years, the adoption rate of robots will increase. And if robots will have the pleasure to assist humans.
Oh,
And designed by a team of engineers and psychologists, and then purpose-built to help children with autism develop emotional and social skills with the excellent resources I come with. So, yes, Victor, I would be delighted to look forward to some bright days with you humans.
oh.
You
Look,
can
I think you can just stop, Nicci. We're just going to interview QT. Hey, listen, just all you guys, some of the participants, I know David, knows all this stuff. And Angela, have you got one of these robots wandering around Albury? And Michael, what have you got? At home, I've got the vacuum cleaner, the iRobotics vacuum cleaner. I find it very useful. And of course, your phone is in sense a robot, isn't it, Nicci? I say, Siri, send an SMS to X, all of those things. It's really, in some senses, in our hands. But Angela, have you got any wandering around the council yet?
No, I'm yet to see any at council or in Albury-Wodonga. So I look forward to when we can see one out and about. They're very cool and not really. As far as I know, Guy might know different. There hasn't been much adoption locally, but it's not to say it won't happen.
I'm just looking at the comments here just about a couple of drones here. If I may, just like the work that's been done in the drone field, there's actually quite a lot of work being done in Australia. CASA is the overarching organisation that gives you permission to do the apps that can tell you whether your drone's allowed to fly, where it is. It's obviously not allowed to fly close to airports and things. So there is a lot of regulation about, where do you fly your drone? You can't just do whatever you like with it. And actually when people sell drones, when the first little pamphlet they get is actually register yourself here. CASA is the overriding organisation, and there is work being done in that. LaBush,
hold on, Nicci, I'm just coming back to Angela's point about take up in Albury-Wodonga. And I think, crucial. Angela, so what do you think slowing it down coming into the council or coming into the community?
I assume it's just a lack of, or perceived lack of accessibility, where people think that they're very expensive and unattainable, would be my assumption.
So it might be a good little research project, Guy and Nicci and Angela, just to work out, how deeply the penetration is in the area. Because I know in your food transport hub, Angela, just a little bit further south, there's extensive use of robotics in the distribution centres. So what do you reckon, Guy? Is there a project there in working out how robotic Albury-Wodonga is?
Look, I think that it would be an interesting investigation to make, Victor. And I think some of the barriers, if I share my life in the bush, is around terrain, connectivity. And so often these things are better done in a suburban and a structured environment. I imagine the automated cars, for example, the highways will be the first places where automotive vehicles will drive themselves because it's easier to control the environment. I can tell you I took a semi-automated car for a drive out to my home, 25 k's out of town, and I had my hands hovering over the wheel, but it did 85% of the driving. There were some bends that couldn't cope with it. But yes, Victor, I think the best way to adopt is to give things a try. There's much enthusiasm within particularly our youth. My 10-year-old son was super excited to hear this topic was on this week. And I saw him get out of the case and run up to his STEM teacher saying, the robots are going to be talked about tomorrow at AWISE. I do know I've got in the audience there, Michael Logothetis, who's joining us from Europe, and he's watching with his 6-year-old son. Michael, would your son yourself have a question for us composed to him? There you go.
Yes. We're not actually in Europe at the moment. We're actually in Australia.
Oh, you're back in the land of Oz.
But Lachlan here is very keen to learn about robots because he sees robotics being in his future. And his question was around, can they actually see, and does that have any implications for privacy?
Okay, so if you're talking about my robots in particular, they can detect motion. So at this point, the specific ones I'm dealing with don't recognize you per se, Michael, but they recognize a form factor. In what connotation would you be worried about privacy about a robot? If you're talking about facial recognition, that's a completely different area. And of course, there are lots of questions about facial recognition and the algorithms and where they're using it or not using it because of biases built into this. So I'm just going to take it a leap further in terms of the artificial intelligence and the data sets that I was reading about it last night. That we need to be so careful, like who's programming it, what biases, what information, because this affects everything.
Yeah, we're also concerned about whether or not they could be recording video, for example, and then what would be happening with some of that video information. How do you know where it's going, how it's going to be used?
Again, I'm speaking particularly about my robots that I deal with. They're very robust. I'll use Timmy as an example. It was just audited by McPhee. They've spent 3 months going through it, finding all the bugs. They did actually find some bugs, but the bugs were corrected, and like they call it a mature and robust piece of technology. Now again, can your phone record? Can your Google Home record? Like these are, they can, and I suggest you plug them out when you're not using them.
So, Michael, and I didn't catch your son's name, but they're very good questions, and we are living in a world of significant recording and listening, CCTV, dash cams, phones, as Nicci was saying, Google Homes, and there is much need for consideration and regulation. And we did have a very good session on AI and the ethics in AI a few weeks ago, and we'll be sharing that video soon. And next week, I was hoping Scott O'Brien would make it. We're going to be looking at a glimpse into AR and VR. The thing with all these technologies is they are overlapping and intertwining. What's amazing is the potential for robots to help with tasks around precision, repetitiveness, areas of danger and risk. And I think, again, Nicci, you did cover some of those areas very well.
My next door neighbour was a surgeon specialising in men's later year problems down near the waterworks. And he would always use the robot, as he said, because would you rather my fat fingers go near the nerves, etc., or a precision tool? Now, that was already 10 years ago.
Yep.
So, you know, in precision surgery, you know, the best guys are using it. There's an interesting point made by Lebosh, who's joined us on other occasions, about the biggest barrier is fear. So, Nicci, I listened to you, and all I'm thinking is possibilities. But of course, there are lots of people who think about fears, and Michael's son, I think, will be one of our possibilities people. But Lebosh, what do you reckon is the best way of defeating the fear factor, if you can come on audio?
Good question, because like you said, you're a very positive person. You're thinking about the uses and you're thinking about the benefits, but most people, not most people maybe, but many people, and in terms of regulation and control, they would say, oh, this and this can happen. The worst case scenario comes to it, and the self-driving cars don't have the rate of accidents as high as the worst drivers. But ordinary people on the street are still fearing them because they see a car driving. I've seen one driving without a driver. I've seen that, and it kind of feels weird when you look at it and it's going around and you just like, there's nobody there. well, there is somebody there, but it's not a person. Someone's controlling the car. They careful about not to bump into anything. They go into a place. They have a program, but we don't actually trust that program because nothing's 100%, and so is not a person 100% either.
Yeah, for decades, Lebosh, we've been.
Yeah, it's cultural. I know.
But for decades, we've been accepting these big airline and buses in the sky being autopiloted, carrying hundreds or thousands of us, and trusting that those programs will handle the variability of air travel better. So, look, it is one of those cases, Victor, that we need to slowly adopt and adapt. And Michael, who was just speaking there with his son, showed that fear often comes with age and time and a resistance to change. If we're open to possibility, we can take in the positives. If we approach things with fear, like we approach an animal, we may elicit the wrong response. So
that might be a good program to get Nicci back. Have a think about the people in the distribution centres around Albury-Wodonga and their use of robotics. Michael's put a note in there, Northeast Water, of course, uses drones, and my experience at Yarra Valley Water is, we're using robots inside of pipes and the like. So I'm sure, the water authorities would be using robotics. So I actually reckon maybe 3 months, 4 months time, if we can make AWISE almost a year-round summit, Guy, we get Nicci back and get some of the other folk who are using it to have a sort of what's best practice around Albury-Wodonga in using robots. What do you reckon, Angela?
Angela, that's putting the spot on you now.
I'm not putting you on the spot, but I reckon that and Nicci, you could drive down and we can have a telepresence in the Albury-Wodonga, in the Albury Council offices, talking to the mayor.
Yes, fabulous. I mean, I was just going to say that on autonomous vehicles, Australia's are the leaders in mine because their big vehicles are actually autonomously driven, but it's in a very controlled environment of their mining sector, and they're world renowned, and they're certainly the leaders in this. My synopsis of robotics today, like I can talk about waste management in hospitals. Like we're using Woolworths, it's completely automated. Like there's a lot of automation happening, and I don't know that companies are necessarily, they may not want to talk about it because of the fear factor that people are losing jobs. But if you can use those people in other areas of your work, so if you've got an automated till in Woolworths, then use that person somewhere else in the shop.
Well, the possibilities are endless, but we are coming towards the end of the hour. Nicci, as always, it's great to speak with you and really appreciate your enthusiasm for what you do. And I know we've spoken before about how you say each day you choose to be making the world a better place or not. And I could see from what you're doing, that's absolutely what you're doing with your telepresence robots. If anyone's interested, check out Exaptec. There's a great case study for a young girl at Genazzano that had an injury or a fall, and through robots was able to get back to school and participate in class and socialise while she was recovering. Another great example of every day choosing where these things can be helpful, not looking at where they're a negative. I would like to wrap up and just cover off for those that are joining us for the first time. There's been a number of other sessions we've run this year. I won't read them all out to you. These technologies do overlap, and we do have some more sessions coming up. Today we've got the future of robots in the workplace, and again, thanks, Nicci. Next week we've got a glimpse at our AR and VR future, and Scott O'Brien, who's going to be speaking there from Humens, is an expert in that space, and he's very interested in telepresence and talking about holographics. And I can think of R2-D2 when we saw Princess Leia projected, when we get to the point of actually not having a flat screen and standing behind robots, but there's this three-dimensional figure. So some amazing things coming up there. We also are looking at evolving AWISE. We will stop for Christmas and the New Year, and hopefully we'll all get a break. We have some extra subjects that we're looking to flow into in the new year. And of course, we'd love any suggestions. In fact, last week we had a gentleman from Geelong talking about AR, and I'm sure he'll be very pleased to see that that's coming up next week. again, I'd like to just say these events can't happen without sponsors, and I'm very appreciative, particularly of the Victorian government, for the funds they provide and the support of the other organisations you can see here. I'd especially like to thank Victor Purton, our Optimism Officer from the Centre for Optimism, and again, Nicci, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to share with us your knowledge and passion for robots.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for having me, and lovely that you all could be joining us today.
Wonderful. So I'll conclude there formally. If anyone does want to ask Nicci a couple of questions, happy to stick around and chat.
I have signed up to your robotics club already, Nicci.
Oh, excellent. I love it. I'll see you there.
I can't come tonight, but the meetup sounds fantastic.
No, it's very good. And listen, if you're remotely interested in robots, please do listen to my podcast. I've got absolutely fascinating people there. I've had a nurse that works up in Townsville doing an experiment with Pepper the robot with nurses, patients and visitors, and the interaction that they have with each other. Really, it's a first of its kind study that was done in Australia. So really, Anne Alvin is her name. I've got a teacher talking about her journey into coding, didn't know a single thing about it, got a year 7 student, and he said, don't worry, Mrs. Timms, we'll do it. And they actually won the VEX Robotics, and they're doing something going off to the moon. So, you just need to champion someone with this technology that sees a use in it. But like everything, you need someone to go, listen, this is where you use these robots. Don't just keep them in the cupboard, use them. This little cutie that here has been designed for kids with autism. So like this is actually next year going to be a lot of my focus with Timmy, is this little robot, because it's phenomenal, the work that it does. And, I go, if you can help kids, autism rate is rising in Australia. If you can make a difference teaching kids what their emotional reactions are, and this is normal, and this is how you work with it, and this is what you need to do, you're opening a life for them that could possibly not be there.
Brilliant, brilliant. I've got to scoot, but you have been inspiring as always, Nicci.
Thank you, Victor.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Guy.
No worries.
Thanks, Victor. We'll catch you next week for a bit of virtual reality. Loving the orange glasses, full of optimism.
Think about this is the circular economy at work. These are made by a Sydney startup called Dresden.
Yes.
Okay, I tell you my piece of good luck in the week, Guy. The Dresden shop in Melbourne is in Windsor. And they said, oh, look, you've got to come back in half an hour. And what was across the road but a restaurant called Borscht, Vodka and Tears. So some Lithuanian vodka and some good Polish pelmeni. I was ready for everything, including my bright orange recycled glasses.
Wonderful. I think we end on that note, unless anyone's got any last questions for...
Actually, it was a robot that put the lenses together and the frame.
That's a very zooty frame, Victor. You're looking very zhoosh.
Ooh, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye all.